Good evening, pure potential members. How you guys doing tonight? Hope you're doing good. Nate is talking about March Madness in the stream like I have any idea what's going on in March Madness. I have literally no clue. If he feels the need to miss the stream for that, I guess, I wonder about his priorities. Like, does he really want to win Dynasty Leagues? I don't know, but I guess that's for him to figure out. Austin, what's up? Welcome in. Clearly you are in the right place. Yella, you got to change the bedtime routine. The bedtime routine on Fridays has to be watch the member stream. I mean, your kid is basically getting free access to these live streams, doesn't even have to pay for membership. So I feel like you should be taking advantage of that. Austin, it is going good. I just got my only recent Pokemon purchase in the mail. The only thing that I was able to buy recently, I got 2 of these before the website crashed / sold out. So those are cool. T-Hum is here. What's going on? All right. We got a good number of topics today. So we're going to jump right in. As always, feel free to interrupt me anytime. But scrolling all the way back to the start, I don't know where Scoots is tonight. First member stream, and he's not here. He asked a question, though. His question was, would love to know about your goals in your career and personal life and how you've learned from your experiences. What are you most proud of? I don't know if I'm going to go into all that tonight. But I appreciate the heartfelt question. But some of you may know in my career, I'm a side Dynasty. YouTube is like my side hustle. It's becoming more of like a little bit more than that, but my main career is that I tell high school students not to use ChatGPT. That's my job now. Is I used to teach students about the wonders of the English language and try to help them master it, and now I'm just like a human AI detector. So that is my career. In my personal life, I have a 2-year-old son named Arthur, who is basically just like me, but way cooler. And so my goal is to not screw that up. So those are some little short notes about me. And, Scoots, if you happen to show up in the stream at some point, you can ask me any more specific questions if you want. This is definitely true, Nate. I would agree with that. I'm sure that he is balling out somewhere. But anyway. Austin, none of my students hardly any of my students even watch football, let alone play fantasy. So not an area that we can really bond. Some of them do know about the channel, and some of them have like pulled it up and watched clips of it or whatever. But no, none of them are Dynasty players, unfortunately. They're really missing out. All right, first real Dynasty question tonight from HM. In non-tight end premium half PPR, how often are you punting the tight end position? Frillster, what's up? I suspect this is supposed to say yo. So I will say yo back. And I also have a question for you. I was right. Freelster, why is your name spelled differently on YouTube versus on Discord? Because it's double E here, but it's IE on Discord. So please tell me why that is. Tristan, welcome in. Is that a Pokemon? I'm going to feel dumb if that's a Pokemon that I don't know, but I can't think of any other explanation of what that is. Either way, welcome in. So the question from HM, are you punting the tight end position in half PPR, non-tight end premium? I think this ties into a larger theme of like not being fully aware of your scoring settings and just kind of taking all dynasty advice as equal no matter what your league looks like. And yeah, absolutely. In non-tight end premium half PPR, I think people really overvalue the tight end position. I play with one guy who, for whatever reason, likes to hoard tight ends in a non-tight end premium half PPR league. It's the only league I play in with those settings. But he thinks hoarding tight ends is somehow a good strategy. He has like Bowers and Hawkinson, and he had Ingram and Ferguson and like a bunch of guys. I think, honestly, punt the position, like basically every time, because those tight ends just do not score points. Especially like the non-elite ones. I traded Kyle Pitts in that league for a 2027 first and Hunter Henry, and a couple people like ragged me for it. It was crazy. And then Hunter Henry outscored him. But either way, punt the position. I went into the wins above replacement tool in Dynasty Daddy, which is just, it's one way to kind of measure the impact of players across positions. But at least in that measurement, wins above replacement per game, Brock Bowers was on par with Jamison Williams, Devonta Smith, Aaron Jones. That was the caliber of player that Bowers was providing a similar impact to. And it's just because tight ends do their damage through receptions, not so much yards, not so, some of them through touchdowns, but, Bowers wasn't particularly profitable in the touchdown department. Neither was McBride. So you're just not getting enough raw points for the positional advantage to matter. I think people think of tight end premium as helping tight ends relative to other positions, which they do, but it also increases the advantage of the top tight ends versus the lower tier ones because they get a bonus for every reception and they're catching exponentially more passes than the lower level tight ends. So not only does Bowers become more valuable compared to running backs and wide receivers, but in tight end premium, he becomes even more valuable relative to other tight ends. That's not the case in non-tight end premium. So yeah, if you have like a crazy loaded value team and you're looking for, any edge that you can pour buying power into, go ahead and you can go out and get McBride or Bowers or Kittle or whatever. But I would say in the vast majority of cases, you're better off just playing Hunter Henry or who's a cheap tight end right now. Go out and get Evan Ingram now that he's super cheap, or Jake Ferguson to hold it down for you, rather than trying to pay up for anybody, especially not Sam Laporta. I think Sam Laporta might be the worst asset to roster in a non-tight end premium half PPR league. So anyway, there you go. And I'm going to throw in a question that was asked last week that I didn't get to, which I think was from Freelster. No, it wasn't. It was from Helix. Thought process we should have for a 10-man league versus 12-man league. How do we incorporate the scoring system into our overall strategy? So this follows up on the tight end, what we just talked about accounting for your scoring settings. We had a situation with this where Nate was notoriously not happy about the startup that we were in when he realized the impact that having a full point of tight end premium can have. And it's not a good feeling, when you realize that you've been maybe playing things wrong. And so that's why it is super important to be aware of your settings. For a while, I tried to only play leagues that were the same settings so that I wouldn't have to context switch so much. But I'm realizing as dynasty content becomes more and more ubiquitous and people kind of know, what players are valued at in a traditional league, really one of the big edges would be playing in leagues that have obscure settings. So playing in a full point tight end premium league, tight ends in the flex becomes a great strategy, and guys like Johnny Smith, Evan Ingram, they're undervalued, and you can scoop them up at a discount. You can play them in the flex. You can even play really gross tight ends like Mike Gesicki, and get a lot out of them. So that is something to try to exploit. I can't say that there's like one right way to account for any scoring setting, because it's going to be dependent on what that setting is. But one thing I would say you can do is, if you go into your new league in Sleeper, you do it on your phone. If you go into your league on Sleeper, you open up the league page, you go to the players. You can look at the scoring from the previous year, and you can actually sort it out by like points per game for the previous year, and you can see, how did this change the points per game? Like, I'm doing a new startup now because I have a problem and my friends guilted me into it. That's not true. They just invited me and I didn't want to be left out. So I joined it. And we're doing 0.25 points per carry. So that means rushing quarterbacks to the moon, running backs that get high volume to the moon. My hope is that not everybody's going to fully process how much of an advantage that is, or how much of a boost that is to those positions, and I'll be able to get some values. So I'm going to go in and look at the scoring, and what I expect to see is that the mid-tier running backs are massively outpacing the mid-tier wide receivers. So my plan is going to be probably to like maybe get one elite wide receiver and then pretty much punt the position and load up on running backs, and we're going to see. But I have to go look at the scoring and see. But anyway, Clax, welcome in. Glad to see you here. Nate says he's still on about this. I don't get why there's a setting that makes Mike Gesicki valuable. I get premium for Bowers and McBride and others to matter. Just feels the worst when Gesicki is outplaying Myers. Yeah, I mean, look, I can understand not liking it, but the point is, I think any scoring settings can work if you understand how to exploit them, right? So, yeah, I mean, no argument here. It feels wrong to want to play Mike Gesicki. It doesn't feel like you should. But at the end of the day, like, it's just a game. You know, you just play by the rules of the game. So if it's not enjoyable, maybe don't join that type of league. But if you are going to join that league, you might as well try to exploit it to the best of your abilities. So anyway, that's the point. But as far as 10 teams versus 12 teams, I think one of the big differences is, I think there are two major differences. In Superflex, first of all, the replacement level of, or not the replacement level, the scarcity of quarterbacks goes away a lot. And so I think that quarterbacks that are valued for safety and longevity, somebody like a Jared Goff would be an example of this. I think someone like Michael Penix is going to fall into this category. Quarterbacks that don't necessarily have the super high upside, but are valuable because you know you're getting like sort of this safe floor. I think those guys become much less enticing in a 10-team format because it's so much easier to get your hands on a Derek Carr, a Geno Smith, Matt Stafford, whatever. So I think that's a huge difference between 10 teams and 12 teams, because on a weekly basis, starting 20 quarterbacks versus 24 is pretty significant when you think about bye weeks. You know, everybody kind of having replacement quarterbacks when they need them. It's a subtle difference, but it does exist. And then the other thing is just valuing superstar players even more highly. So as much as I try to avoid trading away a Jamar Chase, a Justin Jefferson, a Bijan Robinson, I'm even more inclined to hold those players in a 10-team league, because if it's a 10-team start 9 league, that means every week you're only seeing 90 players get started. If it's a 12-team start 9 league, okay, well, now you're getting 108 players. So 18 more players are being started. If it's a 12-team start 10 league, which most of mine are, that's 120 players. So that's 30 more players per week. So the more players you have to start on a weekly basis, the lower your replacement level is. Whereas when you get down into 10 teams, everybody's going to have better teams. So how are you going to differentiate yourself from the field? You need to have superstars. You need to have legit needle moving players. So I'm like never moving those guys. That's just pretty much how it is. Austin, I can't answer this question. How did Baker have a higher wins above replacement? I mean, first of all, what are the settings for your league? Is it a 6-point passing touchdown league? Is it a half PPR league? If it's regular full PPR 4-point passing touchdowns, then I would be very surprised at this information. But wins above replacement, it's certainly not the end all stat. You know, it's not the only stat that matters, because ultimately you are still talking about value relative to your own position. And I don't think you can really say Baker was more valuable versus other quarterbacks than Chase was amongst wide receivers. I don't know. That math can tend to be above my head at times, but doesn't sound right to me in a regular league. All right. Moving on from that, obviously, any follow-up questions about specific scoring settings, I'm happy to talk about. Yella had a question, which was just Jalen Royals ? Which is not really a question, but I'll allow it. Chris, what's up, dude? Glad you could make it to a stream. We're just about to talk about Jalen Royals, and honestly, not too much to him. I don't think he is projected third. He's a wide receiver from Utah State, 5-year player. He is projected right now to be a 3rd-round pick in the NFL. He's a JUCO transfer who played 2 years at some nothing school in Georgia, transferred to Utah State for 3 seasons, had 0 receptions in his first year at Utah State. Pretty big junior year, pretty big senior year. Only 7 games as a senior, but very productive. I don't know. He seems like a 3rd-round rookie pick type of guy to me. Like, not an amazing profile at all. The NFL is probably not going to see him as an amazing profile. Again, going to take him again probably 3rd round. So yeah, you know, a guy, maybe he lands on a decent depth chart. You can take a swing on him in the 3rd round of rookie drafts. You know, maybe kind of a Jermaine Burton type of asset. Maybe not quite as good at the peak as Burton, but also not a total head case. So, yeah, probably somebody that if he gets a decent landing spot, people are going to try to juice up into the 2nd round. And I'm going to be taking shots on like round 4 running backs that had, you know, better profiles, and I'm taking swings on the upside there rather than Royals, who seems maybe like a lower ceiling pick. So yeah, I'm not excited about him. Pretty meh prospect, but like, you know, there's some stuff there. Chris, thank you for watching the show. Thank you. I appreciate you watching the show. You were trying to fight me on this. Severance is so legit. Like, if you just want to leave and go watch the next episode, I will not blame you. I would rather be watching Severance right now than doing this. It's such a good show. All right. Well, Yella's not here, but he'll watch that back. Hopefully that was a satisfying explanation of Jalen Royals. JJ mentions in his prospect guide that one of the closer comps analytically for Royals is Rashee Rice, which is interesting. Probably not going to get the same draft capital as Rice. Doesn't have as much as much yak ability as Rice. So, you know, not a perfect 1-for-1 there, but that is a decent comp. One you'd like to hear. Freelster asked if I could break down some of the rookie mock draft from this past week. So if you guys didn't get the chance to see the video, you probably did, because you guys are my biggest fans. But yeah, he asked me about the mock. Specifically said he expected Shedeur Sanders to go a bit higher and Trey Henderson to go a little bit lower. And he says he said that he thought he might be sticking too closely to the draft capital, and then said, how do you balance analytical profile, landing spot, draft capital, etc.? So let's talk about Sanders and Henderson specifically. I do not really consider myself a quarterback scout at all. I don't, like, I want to provide value for you guys. I don't want to pretend to be something that I'm not. I have not watched any film of Shedeur Sanders, like, with a critical eye. Like, I've seen him play, but I haven't, like, my take of Shedeur Sanders as a fantasy prospect is not rooted in me sitting there watching him throw and looking at how he handles pressure and what his release looks like. That's just not the type of analyst that I am. What I know about Sanders is that he doesn't have a super huge arm, that some teams around the league are not that impressed with him, that he's not going to be a rushing threat in fantasy, and that he's probably going to be walking into a pretty bad situation in the NFL, or at least a mediocre situation. Those are the things that I know about him. And based on that stuff, I'm just trying to compare the risk reward of a guy like that versus the other prospects that are around him. And so I'm never going to let a quarterback with that type of draft capital fall too far. But in the case of that draft, when we saw Sanders and Jackson Dart getting similar capital, I think it's reasonable to take Dart over Sanders just based on the rushing profile. I also think it would be totally reasonable to take Sanders over Dart because you're more sold on him as a passer. Like, that's totally a fine way to play it. As far as the other skill players, I think there's definitely an argument to take him over Egbuka if you have concerns about Egbuka's ceiling outcomes and you think, it's just safer to go with the locked-in quarterback. That's fine. I don't think I would get him any higher than that, though. I don't think I would get him ahead of Tyler Warren, who I just view as, like, potentially a real difference maker at tight end, whereas Sanders is not going to be that at quarterback. I view Henderson as a potential big riser and a guy who, unlike Sanders, I think you can, if he was to go mid-second round to the Cowboys, would be a very usable player in year one. You're probably not going to want to start Sanders in year one. So it's like, yeah, maybe he's a little bit safer because he's a quarterback, but at the same time, I don't see how Henderson fails on the Cowboys outside of getting injured, and you're actually get to play him and probably get RB2 production. So that's why I had him a little bit higher. Tristan is talking about some player I've literally never heard of in my life. Daniel Jackson out of Minnesota comped him to Jarvis Landry. I'm just going to say I don't necessarily hold the Dynasty Nerds opinions in very high regard. And I'm kind of shocked that they would be talking about some wide receiver that literally isn't even in JJ's prospect guide. So he must not have been a combine invite. So I suspect if this is a guy that's interesting, he's probably going to be available on the waiver wire after rookie drafts are over. But yeah, that's not a name I'm familiar with. Anyway, back to Trey Henderson. I think we need to remember that at running back, mid-second round draft capital is actually really good. Like, in terms of hit rates, that's a high investment for a team. And when you're talking about a team that doesn't have any established competition, really, that's even better. Kenneth Walker went in a very similar spot to the Seahawks, and he was the third pick in rookie ADP. Now, that was a worse class at the top, which is why that was the case. I think I had him ranked 4th or 5th because I had Garrett Wilson ahead of him, and I probably had Treylon Burks ahead of him too, unfortunately. But either way, he had 103. He was 103 rookie ADP with basically the same draft capital, same type of landing spot that Henderson got in that mock draft, except Henderson has a much better receiving profile than Kenneth Walker. His red flag is that he wasn't a workhorse in college, but I think that's, definitely something that NFL teams could be concerned about. It also could be nothing. Like, he was playing with Quinshon Judkins, who's really good. If he went to the Cowboys and was playing with Javonte Williams, I kind of doubt they would maintain the same type of split. So it was just a combination for him of the landing spot being really good, the draft capital being good, and then me individually liking him as a prospect. And if he was to get that kind of situation in the real NFL draft, yeah, I am probably going to value him ahead of Sanders. I view him as like a real potential difference maker at running back. So anyway, that was my thought process there. I definitely think there'd be a case for Warren ahead of him, especially in tight end premium. In non-tight end premium, I don't think there's a good case, but in tight end premium, good case for Warren. It's reasonable to push up Sanders if you have more conviction about him as a passer. And yeah, like I said, if there are any other thoughts on that mock draft, it's a very fluid time right now. We're getting so close to the draft where it's like it's hard to even have any super concrete takes about these prospects. And I don't do any rookie drafts that are pre NFL draft. So I never feel like I have to have massive conviction about these guys before we get the NFL draft and know their draft capital and landing spots. But I factor those things in very heavily. I mean, draft capital is a huge piece of the pie. It has a massive impact on how I view these players. If you told me tomorrow that Byshell Tootin goes in the second round, I would take him, early second in rookie drafts. And you told me he was going in the fourth round. Now we're talking about, 211, 210, 211, 212 is kind of the best case scenario. So it is a huge difference in the draft capital, especially at running back, and a wide receiver too. Fourth, fifth round wide receivers, they have horrible hit rates. So if we're talking about someone like a Jalen Royals, he could be, dead on arrival if he goes in the fourth round, whereas at least in the third, he's kind of worth a dart throw. One of these wide receiver prospects is probably going to fall, and all of a sudden is going to look way less appealing. I think of guys like Xavier Restrepo, who just had the really bad 40 time, Jalen Royals, maybe even Alec Iomanner. He went in the fourth round of that mock draft that I did the video on. Jalen Noel, Isaiah Bond probably goes day 2, but he's falling in the consensus big board. Jack Besh or Beck, I don't know how you say it, out of TCU. Like one or two of these wide receivers is going to fall to day 3, and somebody is going to chase them. We saw it last year with Troy Franklin. Remember Troy Franklin? That guy was getting mocked at like 201 in rookie drafts, and then he comes out, he goes round 4, falls a bunch, but people still took him at like 209, 210. What did they get out of him in year 1, right? It's the fourth round wide receivers, man. They do not hit at a high rate. So that is something I definitely care about a lot. I had a question here from Clax, who is here now. So why don't we jump onto that one? He says, probably a dumb question. It wasn't a dumb question, but outside of quarterback in Superflex, PPR, tight end premium leagues, can you rank the values of where you want to have elite players? Running back, wide receiver, or tight end. So I know this isn't a dumb question because I had to sit there and think about it for a few minutes, and it was kind of a puzzler at first. So he asked the follow-up, is it better to have elite running backs and mid wide receivers, tight ends, or elite tight ends and mid running backs and wide receivers? So what is better? It's a good question. Yellow Dog, welcome back. I did talk about your boy Jalen Royals. If you want to scroll back in the stream, I did not address the Malik Neighbors scandal. It is not a scandal because Russell Wilson is now his starting quarterback. So you can get out of here with that wide receiver 3 talk. But in the fantasy playoffs, when Jameis is back on the field, that is going to be fun. I'll admit that. All right. So my answer here's my official answer. Is it better to have elite tight ends, elite running backs, or elite wide receivers? I would rank them elite tight end, which is only Bowers and McBride, by the way. That's it. Elite tight end, elite wide receivers, elite running back. That's how I would view it. I think when you look at tight end right now, because Bowers and McBride are really the only guys, and especially Bowers, it is such a positional advantage in tight end premium to be able to get one of those players. And most of the time, if you try to trade for one of them, you are going to get just totally shut down. So with those guys, you have the longevity, you have the predictability of knowing they're going to be top of their positions. So I really think that having one of those two guys specifically in tight end premium is a huge advantage. Then you go to the wide receiver position. Yes, having Chase or Jefferson is great, but the elite wide receiver, it kind of has expanded a little bit, right? Where I feel really, really good if I have CeeDee Lamb, if I have Puka Nacua, if I have Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas. So Nico Collins, Amon-Ra St. Brown, like there are enough guys that I would classify in that elite wide receiver zone where, yes, I definitely want those players, but they're a little bit more accessible to me via a trade. than I think they were just like a year or two ago. So that's why I would put them behind the tight ends. Still very good to have them. And then I think elite running backs are kind of a luxury asset. So yeah, I mean, I love the leagues where I roster Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs, and soon Ashton Genty. I absolutely love it. But I also think it can be a bit of a luxury for high value teams because elite running backs are the most fragile of assets. Like we know that they're very fragile because they just get hurt at a little bit of a higher rate. They have a shorter shelf life. They can get replaced. The other thing about elite running backs, unlike other positions for the most part, is that cheaper veteran running backs are almost always an option for you. Look, going into this coming season, Derrick Henry and Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, even, Saquon to an extent, although he's a little bit overpriced. Those are guys that are going to be available to you for like late round one value. Not Saquon, but late round one value. Or you can get Josh Jacobs for like mid to late first round value. You don't have to go. So in order to capture elite running back production, you don't necessarily have to go all the way up to a Bijan or Gibbs, but you look at wide receiver, you look around the league, where are you actually getting that cheap elite wide receiver production? Because if you look at the redraft ADP, this is not the same landscape as it was a couple of years ago. A couple of years ago, it was a mixture of old and young. It was Jefferson and Chase, but it was also Tyreek and Devontae Adams. Now, where is that elite production coming from if it's not the young guys? The first round of underdog, the first and second round on underdog, it's Chase, Jefferson, Brian Thomas, Malik Neighbors, Puka Nacua, CeeDee Lamb, Nico Collins. It's all the same guys that are also at the top of the dynasty landscape. Really, Tyreek Hill going like late second and Devontae Adams going early third on underdog are the closest you can get to those older elite wide receivers. We're almost to the point where A.J. Brown is going to take over that spot. So it's just harder now. I think it's just a lot harder to get that. So that's why I do think I'd rather have the wide receivers. Frill Star, I don't think that they're terribly fragile. Obviously, I don't think that they're super fragile. They're definitely pretty insulated with an injury, relative to other running backs, but they're more fragile than wide receivers, I think. You look at, for example, right, you look at someone like Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor 3 years ago was the same age that Bijan Robinson is right now. And he was going 102 or 103 in dynasty startups the year after he finished RB1. So Jonathan Taylor in his second season, he finishes RB1 overall. And then him and McCaffrey are near, basically like right at the top of startup drafts. We fast forward 3 years. He's had a couple of ankle injuries. He's dealt with some stuff. He's still only 26. And Jonathan Taylor is now going in the middle of the fourth round. And he's never going up again. Meanwhile, you have Nico Collins, who's basically the exact same age as Jonathan Taylor. He's going 2 full rounds earlier. You look at A.J. Brown, who's a year and a half older than Jonathan Taylor. He's going a full round ahead of Jonathan Taylor. So it's just that they just don't have as much insulation as wide receivers do because their primes are shorter and people panic about the injuries. The situations have to be kind of just right. So it's not to say that I'm like worried about rostering them. It's just that they are inherently more fragile. Like Breece Hall. I mean, look at Breece Hall. He has 1 down year and he drops a round and a half. So it's just a little bit tough. Nate says, what would you do if you were me in that league? Buy another tight end and just hope my wide receivers are good enough. Dude, I mean, I'm in the league with you, so it's kind of a conflict of interest, I feel like, for me to answer this question. I think what you should do is you should send your 2026 first to me for Jawan Johnson and Zach Ertz. I think that's what you should do. No, I mean, I think it just depends on cost. Like, I think if you go to some people that drafted tight ends at a value, maybe if you think that they were drafted at a value, maybe you can pay a little bit extra and you can go and get you can go and get one of those tight ends. But I just think it might be good to have another tight end just because you were a little shallow at that position, but I don't think it's like a must, a thing you have to do right now. This is disrespectful. Breece Hall is not mid. Like the beginning of his rookie year was unbelievable. That dude was going to be the wide receiver 1 in Dynasty. He was on that trajectory. Comes back in year 2, absolute warrior, man, to have that stretch he had in the fantasy playoffs, 87 targets. I think you need to put some respect on my boy Breece Hall. And I hope that he has a bounce back year. But who's to say? Okay, let's take a look at Austin's question. Austin, if you're still hanging out, he said, can you talk through the important rankings changes and why you moved Tua and Jacobs up? So yes, I can definitely go through the rankings changes. All of a sudden, I have a question here from T-Hum. Watching the stream put me in a trading mood. Just got my first share of Brian Thomas. Pickens, 112, 26 first for Brian Thomas Jr. and 2027 second. Okay, so Pickens, I have like right around late first. 112 is late first. So 2 late firsts. Hopefully another late first. Yeah, I mean, I have Brian Thomas. I think I have him at 2 or more base first. So that would be a good return, especially getting the second back. I like that a lot. Yeah, that's a good one. All right. So anyway, Austin asked me to go through the rankings changes. I'm going to start with Tua and Josh Jacobs because I moved them up from late 1 into the bottom of the base 1 tier. I think it's a good time to remind everybody real quick, everybody watching, that the rankings are linear. The tier breaks do not actually mean that there's a big jump in value. The idea is that it's like a gradient, right? So it's a gradient of value. So when I'm looking at, let me just go up here to the base 1 tier, right? So I have Christian McCaffrey at the top of the late 1 tier, and then I have Josh Jacobs at the bottom of the base 1 tier. So that does not mean that Christian McCaffrey is worth exactly a late 1 and that Jacobs is now worth exactly a base 1. It's supposed to be a gradient. So it means that we're transitioning from late 1 into base 1, and it's kind of gradual as it goes up. So in reality, I would not have a significant gap between McCaffrey and Jacobs. Like I wouldn't be paying McCaffrey plus a second to go get Josh Jacobs, maybe a third, like at best. So just to be clear, like the tier breaks, and maybe I could explain that better, but the tier breaks are just showing when we've transitioned from one range of value into another, just so that there's some frame of reference. But I view it as like a constant gradient going down, where there's rarely a big drop off between players. So anyway, that being said, I was looking at Jacobs and Tua, and then I was looking at Jared Goff and Jonathan Taylor, and I was realizing that I don't view those players that different from each other. Like Goff versus Tua, I see as very similar. And then Jonathan Taylor versus Josh Jacobs. Jacobs is about a year older. He also catches more passes. His offense is a little more reliable. I was realizing that I didn't view those assets as being terribly different. So basically I had 2 choices. I could either move Taylor and Goff down, or I could move Tua and Jacobs up. And I just, the latter felt better to me. I couldn't bring myself to bring Taylor and Goff down any further than I already had them. So I figured I must be too low on Tua and Jacobs. I made the switch, and that was really all there was to it. As far as some of the other players that moved, Pickens moved down from base 1. The situation in Pittsburgh is just so bleak, and I do believe in Pickens as a talent, but I don't believe him as such a transcendent talent that he's going to overcome his situation, or that any other landing spot he went to, he would immediately flourish. Like I don't necessarily think that he's like a wide receiver 1 type, because I think he's a little bit limited in his strengths. So I just didn't see the point in keeping him so elevated in the rankings when like you're probably holding kind of a dead asset at the moment. Not dead is the wrong word because he's not. I think he will rebound. More of like a, I don't know. He's sleeping. He's a sleeping asset. He's not dead, but I just don't see the point when you're not going to be able to, you're not really going to want to start him, or he's not going to be better than like a wide receiver 3 flex type. I think I'd be comfortable trading him away for a difference maker like McCaffrey or a Josh Jacobs, or trading him for one of these other young wide receivers in a better spot to succeed right now, like a Jordan Addison or a Devonta Smith. So that was kind of how I landed on moving Pickens down. I moved Metcalf down a couple of spots too. It's just really bad. Like, their quarterback is going to be Mason Rudolph or Jackson Dart or Jalen Milroe. I just don't see a way that it ends up being any good. So that's why I just felt like he had to go down a bit. Angus said, any thoughts on how we should approach moving up or down in rookie drafts? I think it's mostly a fruitless endeavor right now, unless you're just getting really good value to try to move up or down, because we just don't know where the tiers are going to be. Like, there's some things that we can project. Well, you have a follow up here. If we anticipate Hampton at 102, should we, running back needy teams, explore moving up? I think you can wait on that, because yeah, the reporting lately is that he's going to be a first rounder, but we don't know that for sure. He's on mock draft database. He's still around like 26, 27. He could easily fall into the early second. And if that happens, I think there's a shot in a couple of leagues that, or I should say in a certain percentage of leagues, that he ends up not being the 102 by consensus. And then you didn't have to pay to move up. So I think that, I don't know. I kind of think that it should be something where you kind of wait and see. And if you're going to move up or down, maybe just do it under the impression that you're going to be fine with who you're getting in that spot, and you just think you're getting a good deal. But I don't know if I would be too hyper focused on trying to predict ADP. One thing I'll say, let me try to think about this in terms of where I have rookies ranked right now. If there's going to be like a hot spot, I think that mid seconds. Actually, I don't even know if I believe that. I think the early second is probably going to be a good spot to be in, like relative to value. You still need the draft to kind of go fairly well, but I'm just looking at the list, right? You have Genty, Hampton, Ward, Hunter, McMillan, Henderson, Warren, Sanders, Egbuka, Judkins. You're getting to the back end of the first, and you're looking at Loveland, Jackson Dart, who I heard from Mel Kiper said is like a lock to go first round. So Loveland, Dart, and then Luther Burden and Matthew Golden. Caleb Johnson could still go second round. So I feel like if you're hovering in kind of that like 13, 14 overall, I do feel like that's kind of a decent spot to be in. Maybe I don't think that after the draft because everybody gets nuked or whatever with bad spots or falls further than we think. But right now, looking at it, I feel like I'm going to be really excited to grab some of those players in the early second, like relative to what those picks cost, you know, like knowing you can still go out and trade like Jaden Reed for those picks, or Ricky Pearsall, right? Like I would much rather have those picks. So if I was going to try to trade, maybe that would be the spot. I think practically, if you're just a savvy trader, I think you can get that stuff done after the fact, and you can kind of maneuver the board a little bit. But once we have the draft and I have ranking set up, that's when I'm going to be trying to figure out how do I get to where my personal tiers are. Like last year, it was all about how do I get to picks 5 and 6 so that I can get Drake May and Brock Bowers, or how do I move back from 2 to 3 so that I can get Malik Neighbors because I view him as basically the same as Marvin Harrison. So once I kind of know where I diverge from the market, that's when I can really hone in on the spots I want to be in. So that's the part of the process I'm excited about. I would like the draft to just get here so that we can figure all that out. Tristan, I kind of forgot that Rodgers was still out there. I guess he could sign in Pittsburgh. I still wouldn't be very excited, but that would be better than Mason Rudolph. I will admit that. Yellow, this is a hot take for sure, but like, I don't really have an issue with it. I'm not a scout, so like that could be true. I don't know. I know that there's no Caleb Williams in this class. There's not even a Drake May in this class. So I wouldn't be that surprised. Sorry, Angus. I'm a bit of a Jaden Reed hater. I just think that people got a little bit crazy with him last year, and so I've kind of become the anti Jaden Reed guy. Austin, here's a question for you. A question back to you before I answer your question. If you have a likely bye week team, do you need Josh Jacobs? Like, do you really need how much is Jacobs going to be the difference between you winning and losing your league, especially if you're already probably going to get a bye? I think that's the question worth asking right now. Is it better to trade 26 twos for veteran running backs? Is it better to trade 26 twos for veteran running backs? Oh, it's probably supposed to say or 25 twos. I guess that would depend on where the 25 twos are in the draft order. In general, I think you're always going to get a better return for your current year picks. So I would rather not trade my 26 twos away for lesser value than I could get for my 25 twos. If your league mates are valuing them as like equal, or you have like a really good team and you feel confident those are going to be late, then I guess it could be better to trade the 26 twos. But in general, I just think you're probably doing yourself a disservice by trading your picks that are further out, and I would just mostly not do that. I forgot the question. Oh, we were doing the other rankings changes. You guys distracted me. We're going to do the rest of the rankings changes and then close this thing out for tonight because I'm tired. Sam Darnold, I moved down from late 1 to early 2. And the reason I did that is very simple. The contract details came out from the Seahawks, and it's essentially a 1-year contract that is very different from a 3-year deal. Knowing that Darnold is going to have to come out and prove it and earn his job again and again, unlike Derek Carr, who's like contractually obligated to start for the Saints. I don't have that much faith in Sam Darnold to come out and earn his job year in and year out. So I was a little bit scared off by that. I had to move him out of any first round range. So I will trade him for any first, 112, 111. Honestly, you could talk me into selling him for a 201 or a 202. Maybe that gets me Jackson Dart, and I can kind of start this whole process over again with him. But that is a little concerning for me as kind of a non-believer in the Sam Darnold experience. And then I moved a bunch of like boring or bad players down. That's more about me being, one, a little bit more excited about the middle of the second round, and then also being a little bit more concerned about these players getting replaced, supplemented in the draft. So I moved down Aaron Jones, 30-year-old running back. They bring in Jordan Mason. Still a fine target for your contending teams that maybe need a little bit more depth, need another starter at RB2 or whatever. That's fine. But I did move him down from base 2 to late 2. I moved Dalton Kincaid down again as I continue to lose faith in him. I listened to the Dynasty Points episode with Max Toscano. He really explained well what limitations Kincaid has and how it's just really unlikely that he's going to ever be a full-time guy. I moved Brian Robinson down. Same concerns just of being replaced. I moved Tyjae Spears down a little bit just because I didn't think he was going to necessarily have the upside I'm looking for. And I'm realizing right now that, oh, never mind. That's not an error. Never mind. I was looking at the wrong column. I moved Tyjae Spears down just a couple of spots. I didn't even move him out of the tier. I just moved him down below Charbonnet and Swift, I think. So really not really much of a change. I did move Diggs up from early 3 to late 2. He did get a good amount of money from the Patriots, multiple years, and being with Drake May is cool. So I did move him up. I have to assume they got some positive news about his recovery. So that's nice. I did move Trey Benson down a little bit. Kyle Pitts, just guys that I have very little faith in. I moved Russ back up into the late 2 tier right behind Kirk Cousins. Very, very late 2. The latest 2 you could imagine. And then I moved up a couple of pretty inconsequential guys up to the top of the early 3 tier. Cole Kmet, Brenton Strange, Isaac Garendo, Jordan Mason, Jordan Mason, Jalen Wright. some handcuff running backs, some tight ends that maybe have some sneaky upside in a tight end premium. And then I moved down Cedric Tillman, Blake Corum, Jonathan Brooks, J.K. Dobbins. J.K. Dobbins still being unemployed, man. It's such a feels bad moment for him. You know, he finally had a chance to prove himself a little bit, had a pretty decent season, can't get any money out of it. I hope the guy gets paid at some point. But he's just not. I think the league realizes he's just not that effective. So those are pretty much all the changes. I'll be dropping some rookie rankings. Oh, Austin followed up about Jacobs. I don't know how much will help, but my weak point is running backs. Taylor, Etienne, Warren, stacked like crazy. Yeah, I mean, you could... Here's what I'll say. I think it's fine to do. Like, it's definitely okay. If you have a really high value team, it's fine. Probably not a move I would make, especially right now, because you're so far out from the season. I don't think you need to do it. And I would definitely look at other options that you could do without trading a first. Like, are there other running backs you could target where you could trade? Like, could you package ETN with a first and get a better running back? Or could you trade ETN with a second instead of a first or something? Like, I would look at other options and just try to keep the first, because it's just such a guaranteed value gain. Like, think about how people were devaluing 2025 picks this time last year, especially when they were saying, like, this class sucks, you don't want this class. They were just giving out 2025 first like candy, and now everybody wants them. So it's this constant cycle that always makes me really antsy about trading my first for non-elite players. Chris, I think this is a little bit of just like J.K. Dobbins fandom. He was really good in like the first 2 games of the season, and then he was just kind of a volume guy, unfortunately. Like, I mean, I love him. He's a great guy. I just don't know that he's really that effective. So unfortunate. I'm sure he'll sign somewhere at least as a backup or whatever, but hard to put a lot of value in him right now. Anyway, I'm gonna have rookie rankings out for you guys. I'm putting the finishing touches on my pre-draft rookie rankings, which obviously are going to change a lot, but at least something for you guys to look at in the meantime. And then they'll get a big update post-draft, and you'll be able to see who moved up and who moved down pre-draft to post-draft. I did already share that in the league winners chat, so Yellow Dog has seen that, Freelster has seen that, Helix has seen that. That is one of the perks of being a league winner, but I'll be sharing it with you, the rest of you guys, very soon. Otherwise, I'm not entirely sure what I want to do video on next week. I think I might just do some like rookie, like tiers for rookies. I don't know if anybody has suggestions, feel free to drop them in the chat and tag me. Kind of a free week where I don't have anything pinned down exactly. I want to do like a rookie draft strategy video, but I want to do that in a couple of weeks into April. So not next week. So yeah, I don't know. I'm circling around some ideas right now, but either way, appreciate you guys coming to hang out. Always a good time chatting with you. As always, hope it was helpful. I hope I answered your questions to your satisfaction. Thank you guys for being members, and I'll talk to you soon.